The sun was barely rising when Steven Seagal stepped out of his black SUV and adjusted the simple dark jacket he wore. No sunglasses, no entourage, no cameras, just Steven, alone, visiting one of his own companies without warning. It was something he did often, quietly, to see how things were really running when no one expected the owner to show up. Today, he chose the company's newest manufacturing facility, a large building, freshly painted, buzzing with early morning activity. Workers rushed in and out of the entrance, clocking in, stretching their arms, greeting each other with half-awake smiles. Steven calmly blended in with them, walking at an unhurried pace, observing everything. Inside the lobby, a young woman scanned ID cards one by one. Steven stepped forward politely. "Good morning," he said. She barely glanced up. "ID?" Steven gave a small nod. "I'm just here to take a look around." The woman frowned. "You can't be here without clearance. Who are you visiting?" He opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Hey, you!" A tall, rigid man in a bright supervisor vest marched toward him. His face carried the permanent expression of someone always annoyed. His arms swung aggressively as he approached, making several workers step aside. The supervisor stopped in front of Steven and looked him up and down. "We don't allow random people wandering around here," he snapped. "You need to leave. Now." Steven remained still, calm as stone. "I'm not wandering," he said softly. "I'm here to check things." "Oh, really?" the supervisor said mockingly. "And who gave you permission? You're not dressed like staff. You don't look like a contractor either. So why are you inside my factory?" A few early shift workers slowed their steps, watching the scene unfold. They didn't recognize Steven either, not with his hair tied back casually, not without the usual Hollywood presence. To them, he looked like any older man, politely trying to explain himself. "I won't be long," Steven replied. "I just need to see." "No," the supervisor barked, cutting him off. "Get out before I call security to escort you outside. Last warning." The room fell silent. Workers exchanged uneasy glances. Steven Seagal lowered his eyes for a moment, and the slightest hint of a smile touched his lips. What Steven said next shocked everyone in the room. The supervisor, whose name tag read Martin, folded his arms like a guard dog ready to bite. His voice echoed sharply across the lobby, making everyone nearby turn their heads. "I said out. This isn't a playground for retirees. Move." Steven Seagal didn't flinch. His expression remained steady, calm, almost too calm for the level of disrespect being thrown at him. A younger worker carrying a crate paused mid-step, watching with wide eyes. Another nudged his friend as if to say, "This guy doesn't know who he's talking to." But still, no one recognized him fully. "Not yet." Steven spoke softly, the way a man speaks when he's used to being in control without raising his voice. "I don't want to cause any trouble," he said. "I'm here to make sure everything is running smoothly." Supervisor Martin scoffed loudly. "Oh, please. Running smoothly? What do you even know about how this place works? You think you can just walk in here and inspect things?" He leaned forward, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Do you even have a job?" A few workers exchanged awkward glances. Some shook their heads, uncomfortable with the way their supervisor was treating the older man. But no one dared interfere. Everyone knew Martin had a reputation. He ruled the floor with fear, not respect. Steven remained still. "I know more than you think," he answered. Martin burst out laughing. "Oh, really? Let me guess. You're some self-appointed inspector? Maybe you're here to fix things." He used exaggerated air quotes as he circled around Steven like a predator sizing up prey. "Well, guess what? You're not needed. And you're not welcome." The young woman at the front desk shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe we should let him explain." Martin snapped his fingers at her. "Stay out of it, Jenna. You're here to scan IDs, not give opinions." She quickly lowered her gaze. Steven's eyes drifted toward her briefly, compassion in them. He'd already noticed how tense she became the moment Martin walked in. He'd noticed everything. The tired faces, the cautious movements, the way workers avoided crossing Martin's path. Steven spoke again, his voice low but firm. You talk to your team like this every day? Martin's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. Steven tilted his head slightly. It will be. Martin exploded with irritation. I'm done with this. Security. He shouted toward two guards near the hallway. They hesitated, clearly unsure. They could sense something was off about this confrontation. Are you deaf? Martin barked. Remove this man from the premises. The guards exchanged uncertain glances, but they began walking forward. At that moment, a small crowd formed. Workers from both the morning and overnight shifts gathered, drawn by the rising tension. Whispers floated through the air. Who is he? Poor guy. Martin's gonna make a scene. He looks familiar, though. Don't say anything. You know how Martin gets. Martin strutted around like a commander giving orders. This facility is private property. We don't allow random people walking in like they own the place. Steven raised one eyebrow at that line, almost amused. I'm not random, Steven replied calmly. Martin pointed a finger in his face. You're nothing here. You hear me? Nothing. Now get out. A ripple of discomfort spread through the workers. Some winced. Some shook their heads. A few pulled out their phones, subtly recording the altercation. Steven exhaled slowly, not in frustration, more like a man who had just confirmed something he already suspected. You talk down to people who work under you, he said. You intimidate them, and you think that makes you strong. Martin scoffed. I run this place. I keep them in line. Steven shook his head softly. No, you bully them. There's a difference. Gasps filled the room. Workers exchanged glances, some grateful, some scared. Martin's face turned red. That's it. Guards. Take him outside. Now, the guards approached, each step hesitant. They didn't want to lay hands on the man. Something about him felt off. Strong. Confident. Dangerous even. Steven didn't move. I'll leave when I get the answers I came here for. Martin shouted. You're not in charge here. Steven looked him dead in the eye and replied with chilling calmness. You'd be surprised. The guards froze. Martin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a brief moment, the room felt suspended in air, everyone waiting for the next word, the next movement, the next shift of power. And then, Steven took a single step forward. Not aggressive, not threatening, just enough to show that he wasn't intimidated. Workers held their breath. Jenna covered her mouth. The guards stepped back instinctively. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, Who is this guy? Steven's calm eyes scanned the room, taking in every employee watching him, every face, every silent plea for someone, anyone, to stand up to Martin. What Steven said next would change everything. Have you ever seen a boss being disrespected by someone who didn't know who they were? Comment below. Also tell us which country and city you're watching from. The tension inside the lobby thickened like smoke. Every worker could feel it, the silent pull of something big about to happen. Steven Seagal stood there calm and collected, while Supervisor Martin radiated anger like a furnace about to explode. Martin marched right up to Steven until they were nearly chest to chest. I don't know who you think you are, he growled, but I'm tired of your games. Since you don't want to leave on your own, let's make it official. He snapped his fingers at the guards again. Escort him out. Workers flinched as the command echoed through the lobby. The two guards approached hesitantly. One of them, a tall man in his late 20s, swallowed hard. Sir, maybe we should let him explain. Martin spun around. Are you questioning me too now? Do you want to keep your job? The guard instantly closed his mouth, shoulders sinking. Steven watched all of this quietly, reading every face, every movement. His voice came out steady, filled with the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. I'm not here to disrespect you, he said. I'm here to observe. Observe what? Martin shot back. This is my workplace. I run this floor. I decide who enters and who leaves. Steven tilted his head. You run it. Martin smirked confidently. Yes, I do. Everything here happens because I say so. And I'm saying you are done here. He pointed dramatically toward the exit. Get out before this becomes a problem for you. Several workers winced. A few shook their heads in disbelief. One older employee whispered to another. He has no idea who he's talking to. But the whisper reached Martin's sharp ears. Oh, you all think this guy is special, he barked. This random, old man who walked in here like a lost tourist? He's nothing. Steven's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in disappointment. I don't like how you speak to people, he said. Martin laughed loudly, turning to the workers. Look at him, trying to tell me how to run my floor. This is pathetic. He turned back to Steven. You want to see how I treat people? Fine. He raised his voice even more, making a spectacle of the humiliation. Everyone, listen up. The entire lobby froze. Forklifts paused in the background. Workers stepped out from behind machines and hallways. Over 20 people gathered, forming a half-circle around Steven. This man, Martin announced dramatically, is trespassing. He refuses to leave after being told multiple times. So, from now on, anyone who sees him on this property will report him immediately. These kinds of people don't belong here. These kinds of people, Steven repeated softly, his tone carrying a warning even he didn't try to hide. Martin smirked cruelly. Yeah, people who think rules are optional. People who walk around acting like they're more important than the rest of us. Workers shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered angrily among themselves. One young worker muttered, He's really digging his own grave. Martin pushed Steven lightly on the shoulder. Out. Now. Steven stared at the hand that had just touched him, slowly, deliberately. His voice dropped into something deeper. You shouldn't touch people like that. Oh, please, Martin scoffed. What are you going to do? Get security on me? Huh. The guards looked at each other, eyes wide. They clearly want to know part of this. Steven took a breath. I'm giving you a chance to calm down. Martin's face twisted in fury. Oh, you're giving me a chance? This is my building, old man. Steven's eyes sharpened at that line, but he didn't reveal anything yet. I think you've forgotten something, he said quietly. Martin threw his hands in the air. No, you've forgotten something. You're a nobody. A nobody who wandered into my workplace. The crowd grew louder with murmurs. Steven's voice became still, like a lake before a storm. This building doesn't belong to you. Martin barked a laugh. Oh, really? Does it belong to you? Steven looked around at the workers, men and women who suffered under Martin's arrogance, fear, and control. Then he looked back at Martin. He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he stepped forward. And Martin stepped back. The entire crowd saw it. A shift. A moment where power moved, quietly, naturally, toward the man who hadn't raised his voice once. Martin tried to recover, yelling, That's it. Guards. Remove him right now. But the guards didn't move. They couldn't. Something about Steven's calm presence made their bodies instinctively freeze. Martin turned red, shouting louder and louder, losing control in front of everyone. Steven finally said, I came here to see how things were being run. You've made that very clear. Martin blinked. What is that supposed to mean? I'll explain soon, Steven answered with a mysterious calm. Workers exchanged glances. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who is this guy? Why isn't he scared? Why does he talk like he owns the place? And for the first time, some began to recognize him, just barely. The twist was coming. But not yet. If you were a worker there, would you defend the old man? Or stay silent to save your job? Comment below. The room felt electric. Like every breath anyone took was part of the storm building silently in the center of the lobby. Workers stood frozen, eyes bouncing between Steven Seagal and Supervisor Martin. The guards stayed rooted in place, unsure whose orders meant more. Martin's face had turned a dangerous shade of red, veins standing out in his neck. He jabbed a finger at Steven. You think you can intimidate me with silence? With these little mind games, he shouted, loud enough that his voice echoed off the high ceiling. Stephen didn't blink. You're not listening, he said calmly. Martin stepped closer again, practically trembling with frustration. Oh, I'm listening. And all I hear is an old man talking like he's in charge. Workers in the back shook their heads. Some muttered under their breaths. He really doesn't know? Someone stop him. This isn't going to end well. Martin continued his rant. You walk in here like some VIP. You interrupt MY shift. You refuse MY orders. And now what? You want me to calm down. He laughed harshly. You're done here. Whoever you are. Stephen's expression changed. Barely, but enough for people to sense a shift. He took a slow step toward Martin. The guards tensed. Workers leaned forward. Martin swallowed, instinctively stepping back again, even while trying to hide it. Stephen said softly, You keep saying this is your building. Your rules. Your authority. He paused. That's interesting. Martin forced a laugh. Oh, is it? Stephen nodded. Because in reality, you don't own anything here. The lobby fell silent. Martin blinked twice. What? Not the lobby, Stephen said. Not the warehouse. Not the trucks. Not the equipment. And definitely, he took one more step forward. Not the employees. The crowd murmured again, louder this time. Martin's confidence wavered. Oh, so what? You think you do? Stephen didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he turned his head and looked around the room as if inspecting everything. The lights, the layout, the machinery, the uniforms, the badges, the safety procedures. It scared Martin. He sensed something slipping out of his grip. Guards, he shouted desperately. This is the last time I'm telling you. Remove this man. One of the guards finally spoke in a shaky voice. Sir, something isn't right. He's not acting like a trespasser. Martin exploded. He is a trespasser. He has no ID, no badge, no authorization. He is nothing here. Stephen slowly turned back to Martin. That's where you're wrong. Martin blinked. What? Stephen's voice remained calm, but the steel underneath it was unmistakable. I'm not just someone walking into your workplace. Martin scoffed loudly. Oh, right. You're going to tell me you're famous or something. You think I'm stupid? Some workers in the back fell silent. Because yes, some were starting to recognize him now. The posture, the voice, the presence, the unmistakable aura of a man used to commanding attention. Stephen looked directly at Martin. I'm here to evaluate how this building is being managed. Martin laughed in disbelief. You? Evaluate? You have no authority here. Stephen let the silence settle before answering. I have more authority here than you could imagine. The lobby collectively held its breath. Martin's eyebrows shot up. Oh, really? And who gave you that authority? The owner. Stephen's eyes locked on his. Yes. Martin's laughter died instantly. Workers gasped. What did he say? Is he serious? No way. Martin stepped back again, panic creeping into his eyes. What are you talking about? The owner. Stephen kept walking toward him. Slow, controlled, powerful. You've been running this place with fear. You talk down to your workers. You mistreat them. You enjoy humiliating them. Martin's breathing grew fast. Who? Who told you that? No one had to, Stephen replied. It was obvious the moment I walked in. Martin shook his head frantically. No, no, no. You can't just walk in here and start judging me. You have no right. Stephen exhaled slowly. I didn't come here to judge you. He paused. I came here to decide whether you keep your job. The room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. Martin froze. What did you just say? Stephen spoke clearly. This building. This company. This entire operation. He gestured calmly around the room. Belongs to me. Silence. Pure, breathless silence. Then, workers' jaws dropped. A forklift driver almost dropped his clipboard. One woman covered her mouth in disbelief. Martin turned white. No, 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 no. That's impossible. You're lying. Stephen reached slowly into his coat pocket. He pulled out a beautifully embossed access card. Platinum. Customized. With his signature engraved at the bottom. He held it up for everyone to see. Then he said the words that broke the room open. "My name is Steven Seagal." He turned the card so Martin could see the logo. Founder and majority owner of this company. The guards' hands fell to their sides. Several workers stepped back, stunned. Others started nodding like the final piece had clicked in a puzzle. Martin staggered backward, shaking his head. "No, no, that can't be, that's not." Steven tucked the card back into his coat. "You told me to leave my own building," he said simply. The humiliation was complete. Martin's legs nearly buckled. Workers stared at Steven with new eyes, respect replacing confusion. And Steven looked directly at Martin. "We're going to have a conversation now," he said. "About your future." The lobby felt like a courtroom now. Every worker standing around, silent, watching Martin face the man he had just threatened to kick out. Steven Seagal stood tall, composed, not raising his voice, not trying to overpower anyone. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. Martin swallowed hard. "Sir, there must be some mistake. I didn't know who you were." Steven nodded slowly. "I know you didn't. That's the problem." Martin looked around desperately, searching for support from the guards who had once stood behind him like loyal soldiers. But now, they avoided his eyes. Workers he used to bark orders at stared openly, waiting to see what came next. Steven stepped closer. "When someone checks an ID," he said calmly, "you treat them with respect. You communicate. You don't shout. You don't threaten." Martin's jaw trembled. I was just doing my job." Steven lifted one eyebrow. "Stopping a man from entering his own building? That's your job." The crowd erupted again with murmurs and soft laughter. Martin's face burned brighter. Sir, please. I've been supervising this facility for 8 years. I'm dedicated. I'm loyal to this company." Steven nodded. He didn't argue. Instead, he turned to the workers. "Is that true?" he asked. "He treats you with respect?" The room fell silent. Workers exchanged looks. Martin's eyes widened in genuine fear. Don't listen to them," he stammered. "They're just—" But Steven raised a hand. One woman from the packaging team stepped forward slowly, nervously twisting the corner of her apron. "Sir, with all due respect, he isn't a good supervisor." The dam cracked. Another worker stepped forward. "He screams at us for small mistakes. Sometimes for no reason." A forklift operator added. "He cuts break times short, makes us clock out late, changes schedules without telling anyone." A young man spoke hesitantly. "He threatened to fire me last week because my wife was in the hospital and I came in late." Martin spun toward him, outraged. "That's not true." Steven's voice sliced through the tension. "Stop." Martin froze. Steven looked him dead in the eyes. "You're not in charge here anymore. You don't give orders right now." Martin closed his mouth. Steven turned to the workers again. "Anyone else?" 3 more stepped forward. Not loudly, not angrily, just truthfully. "He calls us names. He ignores safety issues. He yells at the older staff." Martin's breathing grew uneven. "Sir, they're exaggerating. I swear." Steven didn't raise his voice, but the calmness in it was more powerful than any shout. "Martin, you had a chance to show me who you were. And you did." Martin swallowed painfully. "Sir, please don't fire me." Steven let the silence sit between them before speaking. "I don't make decisions out of anger," he said. "I don't fire people because they had a bad day, or because of one mistake." Martin looked hopeful. "But," Steven continued, "what I saw today wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern." Martin's shoulders slumped. Steven turned to the room. This company wasn't built on fear. It wasn't built on power trips. It wasn't built on humiliating people. He gestured around. It was built on teamwork, respect, safety, hard work, loyalty. Workers nodded, some even smiling at the rare moment of being acknowledged by someone so powerful. Steven looked back at Martin. "And you forgot all of that." Martin's voice cracked. "Sir, please, just give me one more chance. I can change." Steven studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "You'll get a chance to explain yourself." But not to me. Martin looked confused. Steven continued. You'll speak to HR. They'll investigate everything the workers said, and they'll determine if you stay or go. Martin blinked. So, I'm not fired. Not yet, Steven replied. But you're suspended effective immediately. Martin's face fell. Suspended. In front of everyone. The guards hesitantly stepped forward, not to remove Steven this time, but Martin. One gently touched his shoulder. Sir, we need your access card. Martin's entire body deflated. He removed the badge slowly, painfully, as if tearing out a part of himself. Steven didn't look away. He didn't smirk. He didn't enjoy the moment. He simply waited. Martin handed over the badge. His hands trembled. Then the guards escorted him toward the door. Workers watched silently as the man who had terrorized them for years walked out of the lobby with his head down. The doors closed behind him. A moment of stillness. Then Steven turned to the workers again. We will rebuild this place, he said. Together. With honesty. With dignity. With leadership that respects you. Starting today. The room erupted. Soft applause. Relieved smiles. Murmurs of hope. Steven raised a hand. And remember, if anyone mistreats you, if anyone abuses their position, my door is always open. Workers nodded, grateful. But the moment wasn't over. Because outside the lobby, someone had recorded nearly the entire confrontation. And the video was already starting to spread. 15 minutes after Martin was escorted out, the facility felt lighter, like someone had opened a window after years of stale air. Workers whispered excitedly. Guards relaxed their stance. Managers trickled out of their offices, confused by the unusual energy rippling through the building. Steven didn't rush. He walked slowly through the lobby, hands behind his back, observing the employees with quiet satisfaction. He wasn't smiling, but there was a calm contentment in his eyes, like a man who had just confirmed something important about his own creation. One of the younger workers hesitated before approaching him. Sir, Mr. Seagal. Steven turned. Yes. The kid straightened his posture nervously. I just wanted to say thank you, sir. Nobody ever stood up to Martin before. Steven nodded. I didn't stand up to him. I stood up for all of you. The kid swallowed hard, emotional. Another worker stepped forward, a woman maybe in her late 50s. Sir, you have no idea how much we needed this. He made many of us afraid to come to work. Steven touched her shoulder gently. No one should be afraid to earn an honest living, he said. A ripple of agreement spread through the crowd. Then, someone burst into the lobby, waving a phone. Sir. Guys. The video, it's online. Steven blinked once. Video. The young man practically stumbled toward him, turning the screen around. Yes, sir. Someone recorded everything. When Martin yelled at you. When you revealed who you were. When he was suspended. It's everywhere. Steven took the phone with calm curiosity. On the screen, supervisor screams at older man, not knowing he's the owner. Posted 30 minutes ago. Already at 2.1 million views. Comments exploding by the second. Workers gathered behind Steven, gasping. What? It already has millions of views? Oh my God. They're calling Martin the fake tough guy supervisor. Sir, look. They're calling you the most humble CEO in America. Steven scrolled. Comment after comment. Respect. Pure respect. How he stayed calm the whole time, legendary. That supervisor needs humility training. This owner is built different. Where can I apply to work for this man? Another video surfaced beneath it. A different worker's recording. Multiple angles. Multiple uploads. Combined, over 10 million views. Steven exhaled slowly. He had never cared about fame. Not the movie fame. Not the corporate fame. But seeing the world react to how he defended ordinary workers? That meant something. Suddenly, the front doors swung open. 3 executives rushed in, faces pale, ties crooked, breathing fast as if they had run across the entire parking lot. Mr. Seagal. Sir, we just heard. Is everything okay? The workers exchanged looks. Executives rarely came down here. and never all at once. Steven didn't raise his voice. Yes, he said. Everything is fine now. One executive adjusted his glasses, sweating nervously. Sir, we saw the footage. We're shocked. Completely shocked. How did this happen? Steven turned slightly so the entire lobby could hear him. How it happened doesn't matter, he said. What matters is that it was happening every single day. The executives fell silent. Steven continued. This facility is supposed to be a model of leadership, a place where people are treated with dignity. But what I saw today, he looked around, tells me we've let the wrong people run the right company. Workers nodded, murmuring their agreement. The executives shifted uncomfortably. Steven didn't stop. There will be a full investigation. Anonymous statements. Worker interviews. Leadership evaluation. Every manager, every supervisor, every team leader will be reviewed. The workers straightened. Hope renewed. Fear dissolving. Steven looked directly at the executives. And anyone who mistreats their team will no longer work here. The executives nodded vigorously. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. We'll begin immediately. A voice from the back called. Mr. Seagal. Everyone turned. It was the same woman from earlier, the one who'd bravely spoken about Martin. Sir, she said softly, we just want you to know we'll stand with you. This is the first time we've felt heard. The workers murmured their agreement behind her. Steven's expression softened. Then let's build this place together, he said. Suddenly, one of the guards' radios crackled. A voice. HQ to all units. Corporate offices are blowing up. The video has reached news networks. Steven sighed lightly. Let them talk. Another worker checked his phone. Sir, it has 15 million views. Someone else shouted, 18 million. A third, 23. The numbers were climbing by the second. Executive phones vibrated nonstop. Workers' messages beeped continuously. News alerts flashed across screens. Within minutes, Steven Seagal wasn't just trending. He was the #1 story online worldwide. Hashtags exploding. Hashtag respect the workers. Hashtag legend owner. Hashtag Steven Seagal surprise. Hashtag supervisor fail. Steven finally spoke. Everyone, return to work. With confidence. With dignity. With the knowledge that you are valued. Workers dispersed, not with fear, but with pride. As they left, one thought echoed in every corner of the building. Today, the owner didn't just defend the company. He defended the people who are the company. And the world had watched it happen. By the next morning, the video wasn't just trending. It had become a global phenomenon. News anchors debated it. Motivational pages posted clips. Workers from different industries shared it with captions like, "This is the kind of boss the world needs." Respect goes both ways. Power doesn't make you great. Humility does. By noon, the video had passed 80 million views. Steven arrived at the headquarters that day without any fanfare, still dressed simply, still calm, still quietly observant. But something was different. Employees paused when he entered, not out of fear, not out of corporate pressure, but out of genuine respect. Some nodded at him. Others straightened their posture. A few smiled, shyly but proudly. Steven acknowledged each with a small nod. Upstairs, the boardroom was full. Every executive, department head, and senior manager sat stiffly, waiting for him. Laptops open, phones buzzing, anxiety in the air. Steven walked to the head of the table, placed both hands on the smooth wooden surface, and looked at each person individually before speaking. What happened yesterday, he began, was not an embarrassment for this company. The executives exchanged confused looks. It was a wake-up call. Silence. Steven continued. Our success didn't come from our buildings, or equipment, or contracts. It came from the people who clock in at 6 a.m., who lift, pack, deliver, build, organize, sweat, move, and keep this company alive. He paused. And because of that, leadership must match their dedication. One executive cleared his throat nervously. Sir, We've already suspended 3 additional supervisors who had similar complaints. Steven nodded once. Good. And the audit must continue. Another spoke up. We'll begin retraining programs, leadership workshops, new reporting channels, anonymous complaint systems. Steven looked at them sharply. Not workshops, not paperwork. His voice dropped, calm but firm. We need a change in culture. Everyone went silent. Steven let his words settle before continuing. This company will become a place where people want to work, not a place they fear. A senior manager asked quietly, "And what about Martin, sir?" Steven sat back in his chair. He'll face the consequences of his actions. HR will complete the investigation. Whatever they find will decide his future. He wasn't vindictive. He wasn't angry. He was simply fair. After the meeting, Steven walked onto the balcony overlooking the factory floor. Hundreds of workers were down below, starting their shifts. Some noticed him. Word spread. Within seconds, the entire floor paused. Steven lifted one hand. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just a simple gesture. The room quieted instantly. "I saw your strength yesterday," he said, voice booming through the intercom. "I saw your courage. And from today forward, I promise you this. No one in this company will ever be above respect. Not a supervisor, not a manager, not even me." A wave of emotion rippled across the floor. Some workers clapped. Others cheered. A few even wiped away tears. Steven continued. "We are a team. We are a family. And every single one of you deserves dignity." The applause grew louder, stronger, until it filled the entire building like thunder. Later that evening, Steven returned home. He sat down, scrolling through millions of comments from around the world. Praise, gratitude, inspiring messages, workers sharing their own stories. One message caught his eye. Respect isn't about power. It's about character. Thank you for showing the world what leadership truly means. Steven quietly exhaled, not because he wanted fame, not because he wanted praise, but because the world had understood the message. No one should be judged by appearance. No one should be disrespected for their job. And no leader should forget the people who make their success possible. Steven turned off his phone and looked out the window at the fading sun. A new day was coming. A better one. And it had started with 4 simple words. You need to leave.